When railroads first came to North Dakota, they set up towns all across the pathways.
There are believed to be 43 sites in North Dakota designated as ghost towns, but why did so many small towns end up in ruins?
Brendan Rodenberg visited one of these ghost towns to get some answers.
Ask anyone about the strangest places in the country, and they'll tell you tales of ghost towns. Small, abandoned places nestled in the hills and fields. One of these, perhaps the most famous in North Dakota, is Arena, a small town between Bismarck and Steele. Primarily settled by German immigrants and their descendants, very little is left of this once blossoming town. But what happened to the area that led up to its current state? While we don't have too many specifics, there's enough reports from historical sources and websites to at least get a general image of life there. Much like the surrounding area, residents of Arena were primarily invested in agriculture and were known for using more experimental farming techniques and equipment, as well as specializing in farming corn and livestock. The problem here is finding evidence of all these claims. There isn't too much information about Arena at the State Historical Archives either, much less other ghost towns. Aside from a few old photographs, very few records of the town still exist that we were able to dig up. Therein lies one of the hardest parts of researching places like Arena. How's one supposed to properly study a ghost town's history if there's no history to be found?
The most recent source I found was 1978, and it named people, but of course, that's 40 years ago. That's quite a while. So I would say that if there is anybody left from Arena, they're definitely retirement age. So, and those types of records, you know, you just happen to find somebody who knows somebody because those things are still private right now.
Arena was settled in 1906, and until the population started leaving en masse, the town was actually quite bustling for a small community at the time. Postcards from the 20s, which we unfortunately can't display, show businesses that are nowhere to be seen in modern times, like general stores, hardware shops, and even a pool hall. There was even a baseball team. But now, 100 years later, almost everything I've described is nowhere to be seen. And here we are, and all that's left of Arena, a skeleton of its former self. But towns like this don't just vanish overnight. What is it that drove people away from this place? Or rather, towards somewhere else? Small towns are common here in North Dakota, and if the farmers and ranchers who are still out there are anything to go by, the area near the town is more than capable of supporting farming. In the case of Arena, it was a profitable place in its early years, but there were a few things that quickly stopped the town from growing. We can, of course, blame the Dust Bowl and the Great Depression, but there's another huge aspect to the creation of ghost towns: city development.
It was probably twofold. The proximity to Bismarck and some of the other towns, that whole era of right-sizing your farms and access and where jobs were. There was a lot of migration into the cities or totally out of the area just for pure economics.
As people searched for increases in availability and opportunity, they left Arena for greener pastures. Metaphorically speaking, of course. This took its toll on the population, and by 1935, only 35 citizens were left in the area. This was all before the earliest aerials could even be taken in Arena. In spite of this, Arena actually managed to stick around for quite a while afterwards, and even got some more recent additions. This wooden schoolhouse, now indistinguishable from the rest of the town, was actually moved to the area in the 1970s as a voting site. The post office in Arena, in fact, only closed its doors as recently as 1996, being demolished soon after. But looking at the leftovers, you'd be hard-pressed to know that. While the residents of Arena are doing their best to keep the area closed off and maintained, there's not much that can be done to bring it back from the brink, especially when you consider the years of harsh weather beating down on the buildings. Adding to the deterioration, locals who seek to maintain the town have noted that trespassers have frequently visited ghost towns to steal property and leave their marks. Unfortunately, judging by the graffiti and the overturned furniture in this house, the comments come from an understandably worrying place. It seems ironic that our interest in these small towns only develops when they're gone. Is it morbid curiosity? Maybe. But there's still plenty we can gain from them, and perhaps we can learn how to avoid creating more ghost towns in the future. In Arena, North Dakota, for KX News, I'm Brendan Rodenberg.
Officials and local farmers near the area request that ghost towns are left undisturbed out of respect for their heritage and their history.